170 years ago. What were you up to back then? That's right, you were not even born yet, but the sourdough starter was. Isn't that amazing? Around the time of the San Francisco Gold Rush, this sourdough starter began its journey, traveling through generations and surviving history. Fast forward to today, I bought a clone of this for $12 and I've spent the last week bringing that up to speed. I'm going to put this to the test and face it off in an epic sourdough battle against my 5-year-old sourdough starter, who I affectionately call Picard after my favorite Star Trek captain. But that's not all it's going to face off against. It's also going up against a brand new sourdough starter that I just started from scratch 7 days ago. I'm going to find out, is a century-and-a-half-old sourdough starter the key to unparalleled sourdough success, or is it just a good story? Or both, maybe. Join me as I put these starters to the test in a battle of age, rise, and flavor. This isn't just baking. This is a time-traveling taste test. Let's go. Let's talk about some of the variables and techniques I'm going to be using in this experiment, starting with the bread. The bread is using an auto-least method, which means that the water and flour are fully integrated for a specific amount of time before I include the starter and the salt. In this experiment, I'm letting them auto-least for approximately an hour and a half. The bread itself is a mixture of bread flour and whole white wheat flour. They are 77% hydration, and their total mass is approximately 1.2 kilograms. As far as my house, the temperature in my house is approximately 70 degrees Fahrenheit. It is wintertime where I live, and it is a little bit colder, which is less ideal for the maximum potential growth for my starter. As far as starters go, this is the brand new starter. It is approximately 7 days old, started from scratch. This is the 170-year-old sourdough starter. This started as a packet of dehydrated starter, and it was brought up to speed over the course of 7 days. And this is my 5-year-old sourdough starter, Picard, who I have maintained over the last 5 years. All three of these starters were fed around the same time each day, and during that time, I have been studying what their life cycle looks like to help me kind of predict what bulk fermentation times will be. And they are quite different. So the bulk fermentation times for these will vary based off the starter. For example, the newer starter, the bulk fermentation time is going to be longer than it would be for these two that are more mature. As far as expectations go, I'm really interested to see the results for this. It's been a week in the making. My anticipation for what's going to happen is super high. I kind of expect the newer sourdough starter to lag behind these two a little bit. I know what I'm going to get from Picard. You know, he's been very consistent over the last 5 years. I'm super familiar with his life cycle and bulk fermentation times. These two I'm a little more unclear. I think this one's going to take a little longer for bulk fermentation and could maybe lack in some of the other areas that Picard might excel at. And the 170-year-old sourdough starter, I'm really not sure what to expect from this. If I'm being completely honest, I was very skeptical of this. When I ordered this, it came in a packet of dehydrated sourdough, which is normal for these, and bringing it up to speed was kind of a little eye-opening at first when I first read the instructions. This is the first time I've done something like this with a really aged sourdough starter, and the instructions were basically reading to me how you would create a brand new sourdough starter. So my suspicion level was kind of high at that. But what I did notice was that when I was making these two or starting these two at the same time, around day 3, the 170-year-old sourdough starter really started to excel when this one was still kind of chugging along, trying to develop its yeast community. So that was an unexpected surprise or pleasant surprise that on day 3, the 170-year-old sourdough starter really started to excel, and you could see it performed almost just as good as Picard was as far as feedings and timing goes. So I'm really curious to see what the end result of the final product is with all 3 of these starters. So the first step in this experiment is to actually mix the dough with these starters and start the bulk fermentation process. I'm not going to film that entire process. It's a lot of just sitting around waiting for the fermentation to happen. That's pretty boring. You should know that typically during my bulk fermentation process, I will do 3 to 4 sets of coil folds. The timing for these are going to vary. I usually base the bulk fermentation time off of the life cycle I've observed of the starters over the last couple of days. And I can tell you right off the bat that this one's going to take a lot longer than these 2. But at the end of the bulk fermentation process, I'm going to check back in and go over anything interesting that I found with you. So stay tuned for the next segment for that. So bulk fermentation is done, and I gotta be honest, I was a little surprised at how my new sourdough starter was able to keep up with both Picard, my 5-year-old sourdough starter, and also the 170-year-old sourdough starter. When I went to check them throughout the process, all 3 were getting great fermentation. Lots of gas activity, bubbles. You could tell that all 3 were really excelling at the rise stage. So I made the decision to pull all 3 at the same time, and the total bulk fermentation time was about 4.5 hours. Now, during those 4.5 hours, I did 3 sets of coil folds. And after I shaped those, I put them in the fridge to cold proof overnight. And I know you don't have to cold proof. You can bake them straight from shaping, but I really like the cold proofing process. Plus, it works better with my schedule. And that's what I typically do is I'll cold proof those. So tomorrow is when we'll do the actual fun part of baking the bread and checking out the final results. And in a perfect world, we'd have 3 identical, beautiful loaves of bread. I have a feeling, just based off how different these starters are, that we might see some different results. So I'm really curious about that. I'm going to be looking at things like the shape or aesthetic of the bread, the color, the ear, the crumb, and of course the taste. So we're going to check all that stuff out. So stay tuned for the next segment where we fast forward through time to the next day where I am about to bake these. I'll see you then. So we're back for day 2. It's bake day. I'm super excited to see how these turn out. I am really curious how this is going to go. I've got all 3 out here. They've been cold proofing in my fridge for approximately 18 hours. I'm going to bake them one at a time in a Challenger bread pan at 450 degrees. I wanted to take them all out and talk about them real quick and then put them back in the fridge until it's their time to bake. But the one on the left here is the newbie sourdough starter. The one in the middle is the Picard, or my 5-year-old sourdough starter. And the one on the far right here is the 170-year-old sourdough starter. And my first observation is that the 170-year-old sourdough starter seems to have had some extra activity in the fridge. You can see it's got a nice rounded top to it. And the other 2 are similar, but what I typically expect them to look like after cold proofing in my fridge overnight. So I'm super excited to get started baking these. I'm going to start with newbie first, and then Picard, and then the 170-year-old sourdough starter. And I would love to hear what your predictions are. If you want to pause the video and leave a comment with what you think the final result would be, I'd love to see that. And let's get started. Here we have the newbie loaf. Just going to do a single functional score on this. And going in the oven. And here's loaf 2. This is the 5-year-old starter Picard. Got a little crazy with the rice flour there. Just going to do a functional score. Maybe just a small wheat stock just to differentiate it. And time to bake. And last but not least, we have the 170-year-old sourdough starter dough. I'm just going to I'll start with a single functional score on this one, and then I'll do a double wheat stock just to differentiate it. One on both sides, just a small one. And let's bake it. So we're back. They've all had time to bake, and they've all been sitting around for a while, and I'm so excited to share these results with you. I am very surprised, and I know some of you who have watched my other videos are probably thinking, well, you're always surprised. Well, I genuinely am, because these experiments are very interesting to me, and I'm excited to show you what the final products are. And so I'm going to start with the newbie sourdough and then work my way up by age. And then what we'll end up doing is just taking a quick look at the exterior, the oven spring, some of the aesthetics of the bread, and then we'll cut into the bread and analyze the crumb for each one, and I'll even taste them, because what I have heard is that the more mature your sourdough starter is, the better flavor development there is. I'm going to see if that is true, and then I'll wrap it up with my overall conclusion of what I thought in this experiment. But before I bring out the first loaf, if you've liked this content so far, please give me a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. It helps my small channel out a lot. So here is the newbie loaf. It doesn't have the wheat stalks like the other ones do. And honestly, this looks very good. It's got a nice oven spring, a nice ear to it. The color is nice. The belly looks very cool. It just kind of looks like your classic artisan loaf of sourdough bread. And it's got some nice bubbles on the side. Quite a lot of rice flour. I honestly kind of overdid it with the rice flour when I was shaping these loaves, but that's okay. This starter, again, is only 7 days old, which is not very old. That's as new as it gets, really. And I created that starter with the process I have on my YouTube channel, if you're interested in that. But let's move on to the next one. So here is Picard. This is a 5-year-old starter, and it's got the one wheat stalk on the side. It does look pretty good. It's got a nice oven spring, a nice ear. But when I compare it to the brand new starter, one thing that surprises me, it's just, well, actually, those are pretty similar. But I would say that the new starter loaf has a tiny bit more of an oven spring than Picard does, which surprises me a little bit. Maybe Picard is jealous that I brought 2 new starters into the fold for this experiment, and I need to spend a little more time with Picard. But it still looks very good. Picard was started about 5 years ago, and it's got a nice ear, nice belly, nice color, some bubbles, a lot of rice flour, but that's okay. And so let's check out the one you probably all want to see, the 170-year-old starter loaf. So here it is. It looks great to me. The ear isn't as pronounced as the other 2 are, I don't think. Let me bring one back into the picture here. I don't know. What do you think? The oven spring is fantastic. I will give it that. The texture on the outside looks great. This has the double wheat stalks, as you remember from when I scored it. It looks fantastic to me. I'm really impressed by this. Again, this one, it is only 7 days old, really. I got it as a dehydrated packet of sourdough starter, and I brought it up to speed in 7 days for this video. But really, as I mentioned, on day 3 or 4, it really started ripping through the feeding process compared to the brand new sourdough starter. So I'm not surprised that the results are as good as they are here. Now, I'm going to bring them all out to do a comparison. So here they all are by age. This should kind of show you how the oven spring turned out for all of these. We've got the brand new one, the 5-year-old one, and the 170-year-old sourdough starter. Now, the big test, to me anyway, is what does the crumb look like? So I'm going to open these up now. They've all been sitting for about an hour and a half. I'm going to look at the crumb for each one and do a little analysis on that. So here's Newbie. I'm going to cut it open and we're going to look at the crumb together. As I'm doing more of these videos, I'm getting much better at cutting bread while sitting down. So here's the crumb. I have not really looked at it closely yet. So that looks really good to me. There's that one really big air pocket right there, but I mean, it looks kind of pretty. And the air pockets are generally pretty well dispersed around the loaf, around the crumb. I think this did a really good job. This is 77% hydration, and the shape of the bread looks pretty good. So I'm impressed with this one. This is only 7 days old. The next one is Picard. Let's see how Picard did. Five-year-old sourdough starter. I have not looked at the crumb as closely as you have here, but let me take a peek. Yeah, that's pretty on point with what I typically see from Picard. It's not exactly an open crumb, but it's not super closed either. This is, 77% hydration. The fermentation was really good. They're all evenly distributed around the crumb. I think this looks really good. So, all right, the moment of truth now, the 170-year-old sourdough loaf. Let's take a look at what that crumb looks like. All right, so here it is. Again, I'm really impressed with the oven spring from this one. Has a different kind of feel to it as I cut it open. All right, I'm not going to look at it. You can look at it first. All right, let's see. So yeah, that looks great. It's very well. It's very evenly distributed. There's a ton of little tiny air pockets there if you look closely. That is pretty cool. I'm impressed. That's great. This is 77% hydration too. All of these loaves are the same exact ratio of bread flour to white whole wheat flour. So I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison now of all of these loaves. So here they all are, and you can kind of see for yourself on the video how they compare. So this is Newbie, Picard, and then the 170-year-old starter. And the final test I'm going to do here is to actually taste them. I'm really curious about why people always say the more mature of a starter you have, the more flavored profile it has. That doesn't, I'm a little skeptical of that, so I'd like to test that out. All right, a little taste test here. I was hesitant to do this on camera. I know a lot of people don't like watching other people eat on camera, and I'll keep my mouth shut while I'm chewing. But I just want to, give you the full experience here um, of this test. So here's a little piece of the newbie loaf. Okay, wash my palate. All right, and here's Picard. Tastes pretty similar, honestly. Yeah, tastes very similar. Let's taste this 170-year-old loaf. Yeah, I would say it tastes all three taste very similar to me. Um, Maybe if I had like a whole piece of one, I might notice a difference, but with just the little nibbles that I had, they all taste pretty similar to me. They taste fantastic, all of them. Um, if you haven't made bread before at home, I would highly recommend it. It's unlike anything else. Um, but I think I don't really. I think the flavor development really happens during fermentation, and um, I don't necessarily buy that just because your starter is a certain age or maturity level that it's going to change the whole flavor profile of your bread. I could be wrong on that. I don't know. Someone in the comments correct me if I'm wrong. But I also think the type of flour you use has a big say in that too. I do notice a big difference in taste when I'm using more whole wheats um, or whole grain flours versus just like bread flour or all-purpose flour, because you have that bran and germ included. And typically, the more whole grain flour you use in your loaf, the more of a sour, that stereotypical sourdough taste you're going to get, at least in my experience. All right, so what do I actually think of this experiment and the results? Well, I think there's some major takeaways here. And before I get into that, I just want to give a disclaimer that I'm not a microbiologist. And so these opinions are based off my own personal experience. I'm not doing any lab testing on these starters or anything like that. But the first takeaway is that if you're just starting your sourdough adventure or bread making adventure, this video should be very encouraging for you, because look at the loaf of bread that I made with a 7-day-old sourdough starter. That should be very encouraging. You can do it. You can create one yourself, and you can have success with that. Another takeaway is that I was very impressed with the 170-year-old sourdough starter. Where I was really impressed is how quickly it got up to speed. So, on day 3, it was just ripping through the feeding sessions. It was really a sight to be seen. And it was a really stark contrast when I was creating the new one alongside with it. So if you're someone that, you don't want to go through the whole process of creating your own sourdough starter, and you just want to quickly get that process taken care of, looking into an aged or mature sourdough starter could be the option for you. And you can get great results with it very quickly. As you saw, the 170-year-old sourdough starter had the best results out of all three, I would say. If you're looking at things like oven spring and fermentation time. You know, the fermentation time, I probably could have pulled this a lot sooner than I did these two, because it was really doing great. And that's with my cold house. You know, it's like 70 degrees in here, which is pretty cold. Also, one tip I have for if you have a cold house is if you're doing the auto lease method, you can use really warm water when you're doing that first integration of flour and water. And then since you're not adding the starter until a lot later, by the time you actually do add your starter in, you know, the overall temperature of your dough is going to be in the upper 70s or low 80s, which can really help kind of speed up your fermentation process. The third takeaway is that I really need to spend more time with Picard, because Picard, he's my guy. And he underperformed both of these two, I would say. Maybe not in the crumb department, but definitely in oven spring. And I think I will need to troubleshoot on getting him back up to speed and at his maximum strength, so we can continue making some awesome bread together. And then I would say the last takeaway is the story piece of this whole thing. How important is the story for you? And some of you might be saying, come on, bro, it's not that serious, it's just bread. Well, to some people, it's more than that. And I had a commenter on one of my recent videos let me know that he's been using his mother's sourdough starter that's over 40 years old that he got from her when she passed away. And that's a great story. You know, these sourdough starters can really be generational and something you pass along through your family. And you might not care about that. Maybe the cooler story to you is that the starter came from the time of the San Francisco Gold Rush, or that it's just 150 to 170 years old. Maybe that's what's cool to you. Or maybe you don't care about the story at all, and that's completely fine. You just want something that works, and that's it. I think what this video showed is that either way you go, you can have success. So the story is really what you want it to be. I'm really proud of Picard. I started him about 5 years ago. We've been making a lot of bread with Picard. I get super excited when friends or family ask me to have a branch of Picard. And I know that, you know, if someday something were to happen to me, you know, the sourdough starter I created in my house, one day will live on, helping other people make bread. So it's all really what you're looking for. But as far as the 170-year-old sourdough starter, I do give it 2 thumbs up. I think it's a really cool idea. It's really cool to say you have something that's almost a couple centuries old and it makes great bread. So it really depends on what you're looking for. I hope you really enjoyed this experiment. I had so much fun making this. I really look forward to hearing your comments. The last couple baking experiment videos I did, I had some great comments and observations that I missed. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you. And thank you so much for watching. Happy baking, everyone.